atas! Tolong saya!
Sumatra, Indonesia is drowning, and the destruction is spreading fast. What began as relentless monsoon rainfall has now exploded into a full-scale disaster, overwhelming cities, villages, and entire river systems across the island. From the mountainous interiors to the densely populated coastline, water has taken control, reshaping the land with terrifying force. At the heart of this crisis lies Padang, the capital of West Sumatra. A coastal city now fighting to survive against rising floodwaters, collapsing infrastructure, and an unfolding humanitarian emergency. For days, torrential rain has fallen without pause. Rivers that once sustained life have turned violent, bursting through embankments and tearing across communities. Streets, farms, and neighborhoods have been violently transformed into channels of destruction. In many areas, the boundary between land and water has completely disappeared. What remains behind is a shattered landscape, thick mud, scattered debris, collapsed buildings, and remains of everyday life. Across northern and western Sumatra, floodwaters surge through densely packed neighborhoods, ripping walls from homes, smashing windows, and leaving buildings twisted and leaning at impossible angles.
Tahan, tahan, dorong! Ya Allah, ya Allah! Jangan lepas, jangan lepas! Woi! Mundur, mundur!
In Padang, one of Sumatra's most important cities, the impact has been devastating. Low-lying districts were among the first to be overwhelmed as drainage systems collapsed under the sheer volume of rain. Water poured into residential areas within minutes, turning streets into raging brown rivers. Motorcycles, cars, and market stalls were swept away as currents strengthened with every passing hour. Entire blocks of Padang disappeared beneath muddy water. Residents climbed onto rooftops, balconies, and second floors, waving desperately for help as flood levels continued to rise. In some neighborhoods, water reached chest height inside homes, leaving families trapped with nowhere to go. As the floods spread inland, rural communities faced an even harsher reality. Villages nestled between steep river valleys were cut off completely. Landslides triggered by saturated soil collapsed hillsides onto roads, burying access routes under massive piles of earth and rock. What once took minutes to travel now requires hours, if it's possible at all. Transportation networks across Sumatra have been crippled. Key highways connecting Padang to inland towns buckled under landslides. Bridges twisted out of alignment or were swept away entirely, cutting off entire regions from emergency aid. In some areas, asphalt peeled apart as floodwater undermined road foundations from below. Emergency crews are racing against time, but the scale of destruction has slowed every response. Heavy equipment struggles to reach disaster zones as roads remain blocked or unstable. In remote areas, rescue teams are forced to move on foot, carrying supplies through knee-deep mud and debris. Isolation has become a deadly threat. Villages surrounded by flow, odd waters, and landslide debris now rely on limited supplies. Relief teams carry food, clean water, and medical aid by hand, navigating unstable terrain softened by continuous rain. In some locations, temporary wooden walkways and makeshift rope crossings are the only links to the outside world. The power grid has suffered severe damage. In Padang and surrounding districts, substations flooded within minutes, plunging entire neighborhoods into darkness. Underground cables short-circuited as water surged through control rooms. Repair crews are working around the clock, but progress is slow. Broken power poles, damaged transformers, and submerged infrastructure continue to delay restoration. Nights are especially dangerous as floodwaters hide hazards beneath the surface, and families struggle without light, refrigeration, or communication. Telecommunications have also been hit hard. Several cell towers lost their foundations as floodwaters eroded the ground beneath them. Others collapsed entirely under the force of wind and water. Mobile coverage across parts of Sumatra has become unreliable or non-existent, severely complicating rescue coordination. Emergency teams now rely heavily on satellite phones and radio systems to maintain communication. Every delay increases the risk for those still trapped. Clean water has become one of the most urgent crises. Wells across Sumatra were contaminated almost instantly as muddy runoff poured into groundwater systems. In Padang, water treatment plants were overwhelmed before protective barriers could be fully reinforced. Entire communities are now dependent on tanker deliveries and portable filtration units. Engineers are inspecting damaged pipelines section by section, but restoration will take weeks. Without safe water, the risk of disease outbreaks looms large, especially in overcrowded evacuation centers. Agriculture, the backbone of many Sumatran communities, has been devastated. Rice paddies were ripped apart by fast-moving water, leaving behind deep scars of eroded soil and scattered debris. Vegetable farms and plantations were buried beneath thick layers of mud, destroying entire growing seasons in a single night. Irrigation systems collapsed under pressure. Storage barns flooded. Pumps and machinery were destroyed. Livelihoods built over generations vanished in hours. Fishing communities along rivers and coastal zones are facing heavy losses as well. Nets were shredded by debris-filled currents. Boats were smashed against embankments or buried under silt. Wooden docks and piers collapsed, turning once busy landing points into tangled wreckage. In Padang's markets, shortages are already being felt. Fresh fish, vegetables, and daily essentials are becoming harder to find as supply chains remain broken. Small businesses across the city struggle to reopen. Shops are filled with mud, shattered glass, and ruined goods. Electrical systems must be rebuilt entirely. Refrigeration units, wiring, and equipment are damaged beyond repair. Warehouses near riverbanks suffered heavy flooding, further disrupting food and fuel distribution. Construction materials needed for rebuilding are delayed by blocked roads and damaged ports. Environmental experts warn that the destruction has been intensified by years of upstream land degradation. Hillsides stripped of forest cover allowed rainwater to rush unchecked into valleys and cities. Without natural barriers, rivers filled rapidly, overflowing into communities with little warning. Massive sediment loads reduced river capacity, forcing water outward into homes and streets. In Padang, narrow canals and outdated drainage systems became choke points, trapping floodwaters instead of allowing them to drain. Urban expansion without proper planning has worsened the crisis. Buildings constructed too close to riverbanks and floodplains left no room for water to disperse safely. When the rains came, the city had nowhere to send the floodwaters. Evacuation centers across West Sumatra are now overcrowded. Families sleep on floors with limited supplies. Relief workers distribute food, water, and blankets, but demand continues to outpace resources. Medical teams are on high alert as injuries, infections, and waterborne illnesses rise. Children and elderly residents are especially vulnerable as clean water and sanitation remain limited. Despite the devastation, stories of resilience continue to emerge. Neighbors rescue neighbors. Volunteers help clear debris. Communities share food and shelter. In the face of overwhelming loss, solidarity remains one of the few sources of strength. Authorities warn that the danger is far from over. Weather forecasts predict more rainfall in the coming days. Rivers remain swollen. Saturated hillsides could trigger additional landslides at any moment. For Sumatra, and especially for Padang, recovery will be long and painful. The damage extends far beyond what the eye can see. It reaches into livelihoods, infrastructure, mental health, and the future security of entire communities. This disaster is not just a moment in time. It is a warning, a reminder of how fragile life becomes when nature's balance is pushed beyond its limits. Sumatra is drowning, but its people are still standing.